dreaming a better world, a kinder, more compassionate, more inclusive world. That is the business of Unitarian Universalists. That's the call that summons us to action. Over 25 years ago, the culture of a new little church, Columbine, was already being formed, with members committed to learning how to be more inclusive. Back in the early 90s, when the congregation had just moved into this building, folks got together and held workshops on elements of oppression, on gender socialization, and on homophobia. They focused on learning about the experiences of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. Now, I want to point out today that when I speak about the past, I will use the language of the past. In the last 30 years, we have learned to become more inclusive, realizing that there are more than two genders and that sexual orientation is more nuanced than the words gay, lesbian, and bisexual cover. Today, we're looking at both the history of our journey, Columbines, towards inclusivity, and how we are engaged in a never-ending commitment to building beloved community for everyone. In the early days of this church, Columbine had a gay and lesbian group called Harmony, who sang together and even presented a play about coming out one Sunday. Some of us remember the 90s, and hosting a play about coming out was pretty progressive back then, especially for a church. As part of their work, Columbine members changed the wording of our bylaws then to become more inclusive. Columbine folks put rainbow stickers on their name tags to show solidarity, and the church actively promoted itself as a welcoming space for people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. We continue to extend that loving invitation today in all the ways that we show up in the world. We march in the Pride March at the start of summer with the other regional UU churches. We fly our inclusive Progress Pride flag on our building. We add our welcoming congregation rainbow logo to our promotional literature, to our website, to our social media. As you use, a core concept of our faith is that revelation is not sealed. In other words, we are always looking to do more and do better and become more inclusive and inviting. At the same time, we seek to stay grounded in the knowledge that we aren't perfect, that we don't always get it right, but we must continue to strive to do better, to be welcoming, and not just accepting, but celebratory of the diverse identities that we are blessed to have within our community and in the world around us. Columbine never fails to impress me with this little church's history of being pioneers in this work. Our church history is recorded in excellent historical archives, which are available for anyone to look at, thanks to our amazing Columbine history team looking at Lorraine and Joan, who are sitting together. That makes it easier. Looking back, we learn that just like Columbine was an early adopter of the eighth principle, this church was also a frontrunner in earning welcoming congregation status from the UUA, and in being one of the first congregations to renew that status. This is something that defines this congregation and continues to make Columbine special today. We are leaders in our UU faith, and we do answer the call to stand up against oppression. And this is something we will never finish. It's something that also requires that each of us do a little bit extra. Now, I know that folks are burned out right now. I hear it in this congregation. I hear it from other UU church leaders. The pandemic left its mark on many of our congregations and on our volunteers and our lay leaders. And I respect that, and I hear it, and I live it. But I also want to encourage everyone to find a way to continue to help us create opportunities, not just to talk about anti-oppression work, but to actually do stuff, which requires volunteers and time. Renewing our welcoming congregation status is an opportunity for us to continue to be the little church that could, the little church that stands up boldly and puts ourselves out there to keep pushing things forward, ushering in a new world that we have dreamed about where diversity is not tolerated, diversity is joyfully welcomed and celebrated. So what does it actually take to renew our welcoming congregation status? It takes a person or a team of people, ideally a team, to help us organize and make sure that we meet the 4 steps we need to meet. There are 5 altogether, but we already did the first one. And then we will submit our renewal application to the UUA. To meet the criteria, we've already got the status, so check that one off. And then the next thing is that we will center LGBTQIA+ rights and issues in worship services during the year. We can do that. In our faith development, we will center the voices and experiences of our LGBTQIA+ community. We will celebrate days of observance. And then finally, this is the big one, we'll do a project together as a congregation, probably on a Covenant Sunday, that will culminate in a donation to an LGBTQIA+ organization. Renewing our welcoming congregation status is just a reminder that our work is not done. And it is inspiring when we look back and think about how much progress has been made in those last 3 decades, not just in our church, but in the wider world. It's worth taking a step back for a moment to remember what it was like in the past. If you're old enough, you may remember, like I do, a time when the idea that people of the same gender would have full marriage equality seemed like that would never happen. It was hard to imagine, and it wasn't that long ago. Our culture is still suffering from the remnants of the mindset of the early Puritans. A university student named Brad Crandall wrote a paper called Homosexuality in Puritan New England. And in it he wrote, in the early Puritan colonies, the mere concept of homosexuality struck horror into the hearts of, quote, good God-fearing men. Many thought that homosexuality was an impurity that could spread and eventually call down the fire and brimstone that was showered on Sodom and Gomorrah. So in order to preserve the sanctity of Puritan culture, the Puritans prescribed the death penalty for homosexual offenses. Homosexuality was considered, quote, far more abominable than adultery, the most abominable unnatural sin. So thank goodness the harsh penalty was rarely implemented in Puritan times, but these are the seeds of our culture. The conclusion of Brad Crandall's research paper is that he came to believe that, quote, the Puritan disgust for homosexuality was never as much internal as it was produced by the church in order to raise confidence in Puritan righteousness. Does that sound familiar? The old us and them. And today, over 400 years later, people are still othering each other, creating the normal in-crowd and shunning people defined as different. Here we are, modern people still using other people's gender identity and sexual orientation as a political tool to scare other people. And I have a great example. Someone recently wrote a Google review for our little church that said, send your kids to Columbine and they'll groom your children for you. I don't think they were commenting on our excellent hygiene. That's the kind of ignorance and fear-mongering that is rampant all around us. Transphobia and a war on drag queens is raging. There are opportunists who stoke other people's fear of difference, their fear of things they don't understand, aren't used to, or don't relate to, and it's a great way to get people riled up and feeling righteous, wanting to be part of the in crowd. It's a tale as old as human history, creating us and them. It's one of the prevailing strategies of fascism, and it is very effective. People who don't conform to dominant social norms are an easy target, and this is why we as Unitarian Universalists are undeniably called to stand up for people who don't conform to the narrow definitions of gender and sexuality that Puritans and many traditional religions created. We are called by our faith to stand up for those who have been or are being shunned, oppressed, punished, ostracized, or even killed for being themselves. To spread the good news of Unitarian Universalism and our religious calling to stand for the rights and freedom and liberation of all, and to be fearless and to be bold. This is why Unitarian Universalists are considering putting love at the center of our new UUA covenants. This is the call of love. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Our faith calls us to be bold, just like the old Pride March chant, "We're here, we're queer, get over it." I've had people ask me, even our new tax accountant, people ask me these things. Why do they have to be so gay? Why do they have to be so out there with their gayness? It's fine to be gay, but do you have to put it in our faces? I don't know if it's because I'm a minister, but I get this question regularly, so I have my elevator speech for family dinners or getting my taxes done. And it's great for all of us to consider, what are we going to say over Thanksgiving dinner when Great Uncle Walter says, "Why are the gays so gay?" Well, maybe they don't say it in that voice, but the answer is because when generations of people have been oppressed, shunned, mocked, threatened, and even killed, it is a bold act of courage to say, "We're here, we're queer, get over it." And to keep saying it even though it's dangerous. Even though people have died because they have refused to cower or deny their own beautiful, sacred identity. And this is why the Pride March is essential for the queer community and allies, and it's why it is our sacred work to continue to spread the word that we don't tolerate diversity, we celebrate diversity. Pride marches are essential tools for exposure, for getting people used to the idea that the LGBTQIA community is not going anywhere. It takes breathtaking courage. Some folks from Douglas County, members of our church, recently felt intimidated and threatened by members of the Proud Boys standing in a line outside the drag story time at a pride celebration, like just standing there, armed, all in a row. The threat is real. These people are armed with weapons and ignorance and hate. And if we are going to live into our covenants, we cannot look the other way, even if that oppression does not touch our own personal lives. I am a cisgender woman, which means I was assigned female at birth and I identify as female. I express my gender in a traditional way. I choose to be in a heterosexual, monogamous relationship with my cisgender husband. So unless I tell people that I am pansexual, which means that I could love anyone regardless of their gender identity, no one will know that I am not a heterosexual. I can pass. And therefore, I don't experience oppression due to my sexual orientation. My gender identity is centered in our culture, not marginalized. So I don't experience oppression due to my queerness. So it is not oppression, but it is instead my faith that calls me to side with love. I share my sexual orientation today because it normalizes queerness. To have that elevator speech ready for the tax accountant or Uncle Walter when they ask about the gays. To reclaim hateful and othering language, the word queer historically meant strange or odd. But the LGBTQIA plus community has reclaimed that word because queerness isn't actually queer. Being queer is normal. Queerness has always existed as a part of the human experience, and it always will. So let us reclaim that word. I'm on a mission, some of you know, to reclaim lots of words, including church, religion, clergy, and gay. Gay was originally an insult, and gay people said, bring it on. I'm gay, I'm queer, I'm proud of who I am. Pride. This is why even cisgender allies put our pronouns on our name tags and our emails and our Zoom screen and our business cards, because it's up to each of us to keep chipping away at oppression. Sharing our pronouns is a way to say, you are welcome, and sharing pronouns is normal. Learning how to be welcoming is an essential part of our spiritual journey together. It is the praxis of our faith. It's what we do. Because Unitarian Universalism is not a pick-a-mix. It's not a believe whatever you want. Instead, we are in a serious covenant with each other. One that doesn't threaten us with hellfire, but instead calls us loudly to show up for all people whose identities have been marginalized, to side with love. This is a concept, whether you like it or not, that's deeply embedded in our liberal Christian roots. Because no matter how people twist ancient scripture to suit their own agendas, the message of the gospel of Jesus is overwhelmingly one of standing up for the oppressed. Unitarianism and Universalism are rooted in this concept. We are called to carry on the beautiful guidance and tradition of centering folks who have been marginalized, to continue to gain deeper understandings of what it means to live in someone else's skin, is what it means to be truly compassionate and inclusive. I grew up playing with a neighbor kid who identified as female at birth and still uses the pronoun she, her. But from the time we were little kids, she fought her mom like a panther on wearing dresses, and she wanted short hair, and she said, I am a boy. Of course, she was my most fun friend because we were out there with our skateboards, unafraid to toss the football, catch grasshoppers, climb trees, play her electronic football game, and generally live into that silly, archaic, and sexist label of tomboy, which I now refer to as kid. That early friendship shaped me because not only was my friend not groomed by anyone to feel the way that she did, but she was swimming upstream of all the social and religious norms of our Catholic school and life in the 70s and 80s in this country. And she didn't know anybody else like her. She was made fun of. Her identity really upset her parents. She was bullied, and I was bullied for being her friend. Her gender dysphoria was not a choice. Throughout history, many people have had to live their lives oppressed, closeted, or in danger due to gender dysphoria. But as Unitarian Universalists, we answer that call to create a world where everyone is safe. We take actions that respect and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And we do this when we fly our progress. I have such a hard time. What does that mean? Is that like Freudian? I cannot say progress, pride, flag. But when we fly that beautiful flag on our building, when we come together here and we watch movies and read books and have conversations that educate us on the experience of LGBTQIA plus people, as stewards of an ancient theology of compassion, we continue to center voices from the margins. It's in our 8th principle covenant. We do it even though we know that it makes us a target for cruel and ignorant people, for people who play into other people's fears and seek to define for others what is normal. Well, my friend that I played with growing up, we were normal. My pansexuality is normal, And folks who know inside that they are not the gender they were assigned at birth, they are normal too. Whomever you love, that's normal. Together here at Columbine in our UU faith, we get to say what's normal. Compassion guides us to create the widest umbrella of normal that spans over all gender identities, all sexual orientations, and the whole diversity of physical and cognitive abilities. All the ways that human beings show up as human. Because love is our UU superpower. May this church and each of us find ways to normalize and promote and shout from the rooftops with pride that we celebrate the love and inclusion of all people. May each of us create a safe and sheltering space for each person of every identity wherever we may go. Blessed be and may it be so.